Volkswagen was once one of the symbols of European strength. Millions of cars, hundreds of thousands of jobs, factories spread across the continent. If you wanted proof that Europe could compete with the world's biggest economic powers, you only had to look at companies like Volkswagen. But today, the company is facing one of the biggest transformations in its history. According to recent reports, up to 100,000 jobs could be affected. 100,000. Let that number sink in for a moment. And suddenly, a question that would have seemed unthinkable just a few years ago is being asked seriously. What if Volkswagen's problems are not just Volkswagen's problems? What if they're Europe's problems? Because maybe this story isn't really about cars. Maybe it's about something much bigger. To understand why this matters, we first need to understand what Volkswagen actually is. Most people see Volkswagen as a German company. And technically, that's true. But economically, Volkswagen is much bigger than Germany. Its supply chains stretch across Europe. Suppliers are located in Germany. Production facilities operate in Spain. Components are manufactured in the Czech Republic. Factories are spread across Slovakia, Hungary, and many other countries. Millions of people depend directly or indirectly on Europe's automotive industry. Volkswagen is not just a company. It is part of a vast economic network. When that network grows, entire regions benefit. When it shrinks, the consequences are felt far beyond the company's own workforce. That is why investors, governments, and workers across Europe are paying close attention. So the real question isn't simply, why is Volkswagen cutting jobs? The real question is, what does this tell us about Europe's economy? Many experts point to China as one of the main reasons behind Volkswagen's challenges. For decades, European carmakers dominated global markets. German engineering was considered the gold standard. Volkswagen became one of the most recognizable automotive brands in the world. But the world has changed. China is no longer just producing more cars. It is producing better cars. Especially in the electric vehicle market, Chinese manufacturers have made enormous progress. Many can develop new models faster. Many can produce vehicles at lower costs. And many are now entering markets that were once dominated by European companies. Suddenly, Volkswagen is facing competition unlike anything it experienced 10 or 15 years ago. But is China really the problem? Or did Volkswagen underestimate how quickly the world was changing? That brings us to another major challenge: the transition to electric vehicles. For years, the future seemed obvious. Electric cars were expected to replace traditional combustion engines. Governments introduced ambitious targets. Companies invested billions. Volkswagen invested more than almost any other manufacturer. Yet reality turned out to be more complicated. In many countries, consumer demand grew more slowly than expected. Charging infrastructure developed unevenly. Many buyers remained uncertain. As a result, manufacturers found themselves trapped between two worlds. On one side, they still had to maintain their traditional business. On the other, they needed to invest massive amounts of money into an electric future. Balancing both at the same time is extremely expensive. And Volkswagen is not the only company struggling with that challenge. But when one of Europe's largest industrial giants faces difficulties, people notice. Then there is another issue that has become increasingly controversial in Europe: competitiveness. Many critics argue that Volkswagen is not the real problem. Europe is. They point to high energy costs, increasing bureaucracy, complex regulations, and slow approval processes. Their argument is straightforward. While companies in other regions can often produce faster and more cheaply, European businesses face growing costs and administrative burdens. According to this perspective, Volkswagen's job cuts are not an isolated event. They are a warning sign. A warning sign that Europe is becoming less competitive as an industrial location. And this is where the debate becomes truly intense. Because not everyone agrees. Many analysts see the situation very differently. They argue that Europe is not the problem. Volkswagen is. After all, competition has always existed. Technological disruption is nothing new. Consumer preferences have always evolved. Successful companies adapt. From this perspective, Volkswagen may have underestimated key developments: the rise of electric vehicles, the speed of Chinese competition, changing consumer expectations. Critics argue that the company relied too heavily on past successes and reacted too slowly to a rapidly changing market. So who is right? That is exactly the question currently dividing economists, investors, politicians, and industry experts. But regardless of which explanation you believe, the consequences could be significant. Because when Volkswagen cuts jobs, the impact extends far beyond Volkswagen itself. A factory is never just a factory. It sits at the center of an entire economic ecosystem. Suppliers lose orders, logistics companies transport fewer goods, service providers lose customers, local businesses see fewer sales, governments collect less tax revenue, investments are delayed or cancelled, jobs disappear, and this is why so many people are watching closely. The effects often spread far beyond the factory gates. At this point, an even bigger question emerges. Is this a Volkswagen crisis? Or is this a European industrial crisis? Because Volkswagen represents many of the things that made Europe successful: technology, manufacturing, exports, highly skilled workers, strong middle-class jobs. If a company like Volkswagen comes under pressure, many people naturally begin asking, who could be next? And more importantly, is Europe prepared for the economic challenges of the coming decades? This is also why the rest of the world is paying attention. Europe remains one of the largest economic blocs on the planet. When one of its most important industrial companies struggles, global investors notice. Governments notice. Competitors notice. Everyone is trying to answer the same question. Are we simply witnessing a difficult period for one company? Or are we witnessing a turning point for European industry itself? The truth is that there may not be a simple answer. Perhaps Volkswagen is a victim of circumstances. Perhaps the company made serious mistakes. Perhaps both things are true at the same time. But one uncomfortable question remains. If one of Europe's most iconic industrial companies is now considering changes that could affect up to 100,000 jobs, what does that say about the future? Is Volkswagen the problem? Or is Volkswagen warning us about a much bigger challenge that Europe will have to face in the years ahead? Has Europe begun to lose its industrial edge? Or are people simply looking for a scapegoat for mistakes that Volkswagen made itself? What do you think? Is the responsibility with Volkswagen, with European policymakers, with competition from China, or with all of them combined? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.